The downtown cafe was packed that rainy Friday, but she waited. Trembling hands held the menu like a shield, eyes fixed on the door. It was her first date from an app, and the first time she let anyone get close. Olivia, 26, a waitress working double shifts, had agreed to the date with hesitation, but something in their chats felt different. Until he walked in. The man who entered was tall, elegant, and his presence hushed the room. A flawless dark suit, sculpted features, and unreadable eyes. He looked around, as if not really searching for anyone. When he saw Olivia sitting in the corner with a shy smile, he hesitated. And then, with almost theatrical coldness, he walked over. "Are you Liv?" he asked, raising one eyebrow. She nodded, surprised by the distant tone. "Sorry, I think there's been a mistake. I was expecting a different kind of person." His words cut like blades. She wanted to believe it was a joke, but he didn't smile. "I usually don't go out with this type of profile," he continued, scanning her up and down. His gaze wasn't curious. It was pure judgment. The simple clothes, hastily tied hair, uncertain posture. She felt herself being dismantled piece by piece right in the middle of that room, and the silence from everyone else only made it worse. He left without even apologizing, as if she were some grotesque mistake along the way. Olivia sat there, her face burning, eyes brimming with tears. The waitress beside her gave a pitying look but said nothing. What could she say? That Olivia should have known? That men like him don't date women like her? His name was Ethan Blake, CEO of an investment firm, magazine cover regular, owner of an empire. The kind of man who didn't need dating apps, but for some reason, he was there. And for some reason, he chose to humiliate someone who didn't fit his world. He never came back, and Olivia never forgot. That night, she deleted the app and cried in silence. Not just because of the rejection, but because of how brutal it was. She'd grown up learning how to protect herself from the world. But this was beyond that. It wasn't just about him. It was about every time she'd ever felt invisible. But something inside her shifted that day. She promised herself she'd never again let someone else define her worth. That the next date, if it ever came, wouldn't be based on appearances. She signed up for a free digital marketing course and started studying. Nights no longer ended in tears, but in books and cold coffee. Little by little, Olivia began to rebuild. 3 years passed since that day. 3 years of struggle, sleepless nights, and side gigs to pay rent. Today, Olivia ran a small content agency focused on social causes. She still lived in a modest neighborhood, but her name was being mentioned at local events. She didn't have money, but she had purpose. Ethan Blake, on the other hand, remained a powerful name, but the smiles in his photos looked emptier by the day. After his sister's death, he shut the world out, drowning himself in control. Everything was strategy, profit, expansion, except connection, until one viral campaign caught his eye. A campaign that spoke about empathy, social invisibility, and rebuilding. With powerful images of ordinary women who had once been silenced, he clicked it by chance and couldn't look away. The words felt like they were meant for him, as if someone knew his story, and at the end, the creator's name appeared. Olivia. Grace. At first, he thought it was coincidence, but the photo on the site confirmed it. It was her, stronger, more confident, with a glow in her eyes he had never noticed. Or maybe, one he had extinguished. And for the first time in years, something made him stop. Ethan sent an email to the agency under the company's name. He proposed a partnership for a new social campaign. He didn't reveal who he was, not yet. Deep down, he knew she deserved more than an apology. She deserved dignity, repair, and maybe a chance to begin again. Meanwhile, Olivia received the proposal with no idea who was behind it. She read the terms, assessed the impact, and smiled. Another chance to carry her message forward. Another opportunity to prove no one is too small to create change. She just didn't know that this project would bring back the man who once shattered her. On the day of the meeting, Olivia arrived early at the mirrored building in Midtown, Manhattan. She was used to corporate settings now, but this one felt different. The air was colder, the glances sharper, and something in the silence unsettled her. Even so, she walked with purpose. She knew who she was, and no one could take that from her again. The receptionist led her to the 23rd floor boardroom. The company name gleamed on the wall: Blake and Hartwell Investments. Only then did her stomach twist. Blake. That last name. But it was so common. It couldn't be him. Or could it? Ethan entered the room exactly 5 minutes later. He hadn't expected his heart to race like that upon seeing her. She wore a light blazer, hair tied back, eyes sharp. It was her, no doubt. But she was no longer the same woman. She was untouchable. Olivia took a second to recognize him, and another to steady herself. But she said nothing. She simply extended her hand. All business. "Nice to meet you, Olivia. Grace, shall we begin?" Ethan held her hand a moment longer than he should have, his gaze already begging forgiveness even before words. But she didn't blink, didn't flinch. In that moment, she was the kind of person he had never learned to be. Whole. He didn't know how to say what needed to be said. She wasn't there to listen. She was there to lead. But the past hung heavy between them, silent and thick. And as the meeting began, with slides and stats, the real reunion had yet to happen. The meeting moved forward through presentations, metrics, and well-crafted ideas. But inside that cold room, the air was heavy with unspoken memories. Olivia spoke with precision and firmness, making it clear she owned the project. Ethan, usually imposing, kept his eyes down most of the time. Every word she spoke felt like a mirror, and he could barely face himself. "Our goal is to give voice to those who've been silenced," she said, facing the team. And for a second, her gaze locked with his, hard, direct, relentless. He swallowed hard. He knew those words were more than just a pitch. And more than any deal, he wished he could turn back time. But now, was it too late? At the end of the presentation, the team offered polite applause. The partnership would go through. The papers would be signed soon. Olivia calmly gathered her documents and prepared to leave. But before she reached the door, she heard the voice she hadn't heard in 3 years. "Olivia, can we talk? Just the two of us." She turned slowly, not hiding the discomfort. "If it's about work, we can continue by email." He stood up, a nearly timid gesture for someone so powerful. "It's not about work." And for the first time, his voice sounded human. Against the instinct to walk away, she stayed. Out of curiosity, maybe. Out of a sense of justice, perhaps. They stepped into another room, smaller, quiet, with wide windows. And for a few moments, the whole world paused. It was just him and her, and everything that had never been said. "You remember me," he began, hesitant. She let out a brief, bitter laugh. "Of course I do. You made sure I would." Ethan lowered his eyes, more ashamed than ever. "I was cruel, arrogant. I have no excuse." She didn't reply right away. She sat down and stared at him with restrained coldness. "You humiliated me, treated me like I didn't belong in the same space as you." He nodded, clenching his hands. "And I was the most hollow person in that room." Olivia took a deep breath. She didn't want to cry. Not for him, not anymore. "You didn't break me, you know? You just pushed me to a place where I had to find myself." Ethan looked at her, touched by something he couldn't name. "And what you found is admirable." She gave a humorless laugh. "I'm not here because of you. I'm not in this project for us." "I know, but I wanted to hear you. To say I'm sorry while looking into your eyes. Sorry doesn't change the past, but maybe it helps change what comes next." She hesitated for a moment, and just for that, he had hope. You don't know me, Ethan. Not anymore. I want to, now, for real. She stood up. I'm not sure I believe you, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to. He remained seated, respecting her space. As she left the room, Olivia felt her heart racing. Not from passion, but from alarm. It was like something had been reopened, something she'd sworn was buried. But why then did that pain come with a trace of longing? And why did his eyes still shake her? Ethan returned to his office but couldn't work. He stared out at the city, feeling small. She was right. He didn't know her. And what he had done 3 years ago wasn't about her. It was about himself and his fear of connection. She was too real, too human. And back then, he didn't know how to handle feelings that required vulnerability. Now he saw in her the strength he always lacked in himself. But how do you approach someone who has already learned to live without you? How do you ask for a second chance from someone who no longer needs you? That night, Olivia reread the campaign contract, considering canceling. Working alongside Ethan Blake was too risky for her heart, but it was also a chance to show him and the world how much she had changed. She didn't want revenge, she wanted respect, and maybe a quiet reckoning. Meanwhile, Ethan drove out of the parking garage with no destination. He drove for hours until he stopped in front of a small park. There, where families played, he thought of his younger sister. He remembered the promise to, be better. And he wondered, was it too late to start now? The next morning, Olivia walked into her agency's office with a firm gaze. She had decided she wouldn't run anymore. She would handle Ethan like any other client, with boundaries and clarity. But inside her there was an old whisper, uncomfortable and persistent, begging to understand why. Not about him, but about herself. Why did it still hurt? Ethan, meanwhile, arrived at his office earlier than usual. For the first time in years, something felt more important than meetings and profits. He closed the door, picked up his phone, and opened his photo app. There was a picture of his sister taken weeks before the accident. Her smile was everything he now wished to rediscover in himself. At the same time, Olivia's team was planning the next steps of the campaign. The proposal involved sharing real stories of resilience, and hers would be one of them. She didn't want it to be about revenge. She wanted it to be about transformation. But how do you talk about empathy when your heart still holds pain? How do you inspire others when you're still bleeding inside? Late in the afternoon, Ethan showed up at the agency unannounced. He wore jeans and a jacket, no suit to shield him from the world. He asked to speak to Olivia for 5 minutes. She hesitated, and then agreed, because a part of her also wanted to understand. He stepped into the small room, simple and filled with inspiring quotes and artwork. He took a deep breath before speaking. I don't want to disturb you, I just wanted to show you something. He handed her a photo, his sister smiling at a neighborhood fair. She was the one who taught me that real people are the most extraordinary. Olivia held the photo gently, studying the girl's wide, joyful smile. She felt a pang, not of pity but of recognition. Her name was Sophie. Ethan said softly, almost a whisper. She saw beauty where no one else did, even in me. He lowered his eyes, as if the weight of the memory crushed him. After she died, I became what you met. Olivia stayed silent, but a crack formed in the wall around her heart. He wasn't just explaining. He was exposing himself. And for someone like Ethan, that was almost unthinkable. Even so, she didn't yield. Not yet. Losing someone changes everything, she said, handing the photo back carefully. But it doesn't justify destroying others. He nodded, guilt in his eyes. I know. I just wanted you to know where my coldness came from. And what do you plan to do with it now? She asked. Ethan didn't answer right away. The question lingered between them like something alive. I'm trying to unlearn it, A little more every day. Olivia took a deep breath, torn between anger and empathy. And maybe that was the hardest kind of battle, the one inside yourself. That night, walking home, she thought about Sophie. How a young girl with a gentle gaze had shaped someone so hardened, and how maybe something redeemable still lived inside him. But she also thought of herself, and how hard she fought to never need anyone again. Back in her apartment, she opened an old notebook. Inside were the first notes for the campaign, written years ago. Phrases she had written to keep herself standing. One read, "Only forgive when the wound has turned into a scar." She read it 3 times, then closed the notebook. The next day, Ethan sent a message, not an apology, but an invitation to visit a social project. He said it was Sophie's dream, a space for invisible youth. Olivia almost declined, but something in her urged her to go, not for him, but for Sophie, and for herself. The visit was simple but powerful. Children painted murals with words of hope. Ethan walked among them without saying his last name, without power. There, he was just a man trying to make things right. And Olivia saw a fragment of truth in him. At the end of the visit, they sat side by side on a wooden bench. Neither spoke for several minutes. The silence between them no longer felt awkward. It was full. Then Ethan looked at her with eyes less guarded. "Do you think someone like me deserves a second chance?" Olivia turned her head slowly, her hair swaying in the breeze. "That's not for me to decide, Ethan." He nodded, accepting the answer. But before standing, she added, "But if you really want to try, start by being someone who listens." The words landed in him like a slow, steady heartbeat, as if opening a door he didn't know was there. She didn't promise anything, didn't make it easy, but the fact that she was still there, that said it all. And for someone like Ethan, that was more than he ever expected. As they said goodbye, he held her hand for a second. Unlike that first time, now there was respect in the gesture. Olivia didn't return the touch, but she didn't pull away either. They both knew something had changed, and this was only the beginning. In the following days, Olivia and Ethan began working more closely together on the campaign. The meetings were objective, but heavy with something invisible. Between presentations and script revisions, there were glances that avoided each other, silences that screamed. She remained professional, steady, but he watched her like someone trying to learn a new language. It was as if he were trying to decode a world he once ignored. During one of those meetings, Olivia disagreed with one of his suggestions. The proposal involved softening the content to appeal to big brands. "We're not selling comfort," she said. "We're selling truth." Her tone was calm but firm, and for the first time, Ethan didn't argue. He just nodded, as if recognizing a lesson he needed to hear. The campaign team began openly admiring her. Ethan noticed how everyone listened to her with genuine respect. It was rare in his world of inflated egos and forced obedience. There she led without ever raising her voice, and that unsettled him and fascinated him. One night, after another content review, she said goodbye and headed to the elevator. Ethan, on impulse, walked with her. As they descended in silence, he spoke without thinking. "Have you always been like this strong?" She didn't look at him. She simply answered, "No, I became this." The elevator stopped on the ground floor, but neither of them moved right away. Something hung in the air. An unspoken question, a lingering memory. "Do you still hate me?" he asked, in a tone almost childlike. She turned her head slowly. "It's not hate, it's caution." Outside, the night was cold and damp. Olivia walked along the wet sidewalks, and Ethan watched her for a few moments. He wanted to understand how she had rebuilt herself, how she turned pain into a bridge, not a prison. And for the first time, he wished to do the same. Days later, Olivia received a call from an old friend. She invited her to speak at a university where Olivia had studied for a semester. She accepted with pride. She would share her story and present the campaign. She had no idea Ethan would be there. He'd been invited by the organizers as an anonymous sponsor. When he saw her on stage telling her story with courage and no self-pity, he froze. She spoke of humiliation, invisible jobs, loneliness, but also of rebuilding, of choosing not to become bitterness. "Turning pain into purpose is my greatest privilege," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. And for the first time in years, his eyes burned. After the event, she spotted him in the lobby. "Here to keep an eye on me?" she teased, a soft smile in her voice. "I came to learn," he replied, and there was honesty in that. They walked together for a few minutes, stopping in front of a mural honoring alumni. There, among the framed photos, was Sophie. Olivia touched the image gently. She seemed to see beyond appearances. "She saw essence," Ethan said, voice tight with emotion. "And you have a lot of her in you," Olivia added, surprising even herself. It was true, even if he didn't know it yet. The next day, Ethan asked his team to include Olivia in a strategic meeting. It would be her first time at a table with executives of that level. She agreed when, with one condition, she would speak without filters. "If you want me there, you'll have to accept my truth." And he replied, "That's the only thing I care about." The meeting was intense. Olivia presented real data and highlighted the power of human stories. Some executives frowned, but Ethan stayed silent until the end. Then he stood and said, "She's right. If we're not doing something real, we're just another pretty ad." It was the first time Ethan used his authority for something beyond profit, and the first time she saw him as someone under construction. That night, Ethan called Olivia, not to talk about work, but to say thank you. "Today, for the first time, I felt useful for a different reason." She smiled silently on the other end of the line. "Thank you for not giving up on your voice," he said before hanging up. But not everything was calm. The next morning, a headline started spreading on social media. An anonymous account had leaked a photo of the two of them together with suggestive commentary. "Ex-waitress and CEO, romance or ambition?" read the cruel caption. Olivia felt the ground slip beneath her, once again being judged. She left the agency before lunch and went to a nearby park. She sat on a bench and let her tears fall quietly. It wasn't just about being exposed. It was about seeing all her effort to rebuild reduced to shallow assumptions, and maybe for letting her guard down too soon. Ethan tried calling. He sent messages, but she didn't respond. She didn't know if she was ready to face another wave of judgment, especially from a world that wasn't hers. And even with everything different, it still hurt the same. Hours later, Olivia returned home with a heart in turmoil. She was tired of always having to prove she was more than what they saw. Even when she stood tall, the stones kept coming. She wanted to disappear. But there was work, dreams, people who believed in her. And between fear and strength, she chose courage again. In his silent penthouse, Ethan watched the city without finding peace. He felt helpless in the face of the pain he had helped reignite. He wanted to protect her, but he knew he was part of the problem. "I should have seen this coming," he muttered, fists clenched. But he couldn't change the past. Only what came next. The next morning, Olivia received a bouquet of wildflowers with a note. No signature, no apologies, just one line. "You are far greater than they can see." She recognized the handwriting, and even without knowing what to think, she smiled. Because someone, finally, was trying to see who she really was, and in that brief, tired, and sincere smile there was a seed, not of a new beginning. It was still too soon for that, but of something rarer, the possibility of trust. And deep down, she knew. If he kept walking this path, maybe one day she'd let him in. Olivia decided she needed air. She spent the weekend away from her phone, her computer, and the city. She went to her aunt's house in a coastal village where she had spent part of her childhood. There, among the scent of salt and old memories, she searched for clarity. She needed to remember who she was before all of this. She was walking on the wet sand at sunset when she remembered something specific. The day her mother told her that courage wasn't the absence of pain, but walking with it. Olivia had done that so many times, but now it wasn't just pain. It was confusion. She was feeling something for Ethan that she didn't want to feel. Meanwhile, Ethan spent 2 days reviewing his own choices. He reread old messages, dug through emails, faced his mistakes. Behind the successful businessman was a boy who had lost everything too soon. His father left them, his mother drowned herself in work, and he became responsible for Sophie. And after she was gone, he stopped feeling. Olivia returned to the city on Monday. She had answers, but also more questions. Ethan had sent only one message: "I'm here whenever you want to talk." She didn't know if she wanted to, but she decided to go to his social foundation, not as a partner, as someone who needed to understand. The entrance was discreet, without flashy logos. Inside, young people of all ages were learning, creating, dreaming. She remained silent for a while, just observing, until she saw Ethan in the back sitting in a reading circle with children. It was an impossible image, but real. He saw her and smiled with quiet surprise. He stood, but didn't rush. He just waited. She walked over, and they greeted each other with a calm nod. There was something different in the air. A silent truce, perhaps. "You changed this place," Olivia said, looking around. "It was Sophie who changed first, I just followed." She nodded, not knowing what to say. They sat on a bench under a tree. And there, for the first time, they spoke, without masks. "Do you know how my sister died?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "There was a report of medical negligence. She died waiting for care." Olivia felt a knot in her throat. "The same clinic I took her to, where I was ignored because of our insurance. I spent months trying to fight back, but the system won." She realized that behind his arrogance, there was something deeper. It wasn't just coldness, and it was unresolved despair. "After that, I became a man who controls everything, because if I'm in control, nothing slips away again." Olivia took a deep breath, both empathetic and cautious. "I've lost too many people too," she said. And for the first time, she spoke about her father. He left the family when she was 10. Her mother, a public school teacher, fought with everything she had to raise her daughters, and Olivia grew up promising never to depend on anyone. "But growing up with that promise comes at a cost," she said, looking at him. "You build walls so high that no one can get in." He looked at her as if she were reading his soul. "And you?" he asked. "I dig inward, but on the outside, I look whole." The silence between them was broken by a child's laughter. A little girl ran up to Ethan and handed him a drawing. "It's you and your friend," she said, pointing to Olivia. They both laughed, a little caught off guard, but there was something pure in that moment. Something even pain couldn't erase. That night, Ethan returned home and opened a box of memories from his safe. Photos, notes, Sophie's journal filled with dreams. And inside he found something unexpected. An old clipping with a highlighted phrase, "The world needs people who feel." It was time to be one of them again. Meanwhile, Olivia was writing in her journal. Writing so she wouldn't forget to remind herself that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what hurt. It's about remembering, without bleeding again. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready for that. The next day, Ethan invited her on a special visit. She hesitated, but said yes. They went to an empty lot near a public school. "We're going to build a support center here, in Sophie's name." Olivia looked at him, and for a second, she believed. She walked across the lot slowly, taking in the weight of the proposal. Seeing Ethan there, envisioning something real and human, slowly disarmed her. She knew gestures like that didn't come from an empty place. But she also knew gestures don't erase history. Still, there was something different in his eyes. "You want me to help with the project?" she asked. "I want you to lead it, with me," he replied without hesitation. She crossed her arms, looking up at the sky as if searching for answers. "This is too big to be just a professional request." "It's more than professional," he confessed. "I can't give myself to something if I don't know where it's going, Ethan. Neither do I. But I know I'm trying to be better, and you inspire me." There was a sincerity in his voice that was hard to ignore. For the first time, she saw pure vulnerability in him, and that touched something inside her. The answer didn't come then. They simply sat in silence, side by side, like two people still learning to trust. But when he reached out his hand, she held it for a few seconds. It wasn't a gesture of love. It was a silent pact of beginning again, and in that empty field surrounded by promises and ghosts, something new was born. Not love, not yet, but possibility. A chance to rebuild. Slowly, consciously, truthfully, and this time, together. The construction of the center began quietly. Olivia threw herself into the work with enthusiasm, calling on community contacts, volunteers, and creative ideas. Ethan handled the finances and structure, but let her lead. They were an unlikely pair, but it worked, until something knocked them down again from where they least expected. One overcast afternoon, Olivia received a call from the press. An investigative journalist wanted to interview her about the project. "There are conflicting reports about the land donation," she said. Olivia, surprised, asked for time to look into it. She trusted Ethan, but decided to check for herself. In more. A meeting with the foundation's lawyer, the truth came out. The land had been purchased over a year ago, under the name Blake and Hartwell. Long before the campaign, long before the reunion, long before the coincidence. It was as if everything had been planned. Olivia left the meeting with her chest tight. She felt betrayed, but more than anything, foolish. He knew. He always knew. She whispered to herself. The memories flooded back. The project, invitation, the closeness, the words. Had it all been a strategy? At the end of the day, she went to the foundation. Ethan was in his office, reviewing documents. She entered without knocking, eyes blazing. "You bought that land before any of this started?" He froze. He knew the moment had come. "Yes," he answered, without evasion. "Why? Tell me the truth." "Because I saw your campaign and decided to reach out." "So this whole approach was orchestrated?" "No, but it was intentional." Olivia stepped back, as if punched in the gut. "You used me, Ethan. Turned my story into a PR strategy." "That's not what this is. I wanted to be part of something real, but I didn't know how to begin." She laughed, bitter. "So you started with a lie." He stood, pain etched across his face. "I fell in love with you along the way, but I started wrong." "That doesn't erase how it began," she said, tears in her eyes. "I believed in you, and for the first time, I let someone in. And I ruined it," he said, broken. She walked out without looking back. Outside, the sky was darkening as if predicting the storm. The city, once full of possibility, now felt like a maze with no exit. She walked to the subway station, her eyes vacant and her soul silent. Because sometimes, the worst part isn't being betrayed. It's having believed. In the days that followed, Olivia disappeared. She canceled meetings, turned off her phone, answered no one. She returned to her mother's house, where everything was simple and painfully real. Her mother welcomed her in silence with nothing but a hug. There she cried out everything she had held in for years. Ethan, on the other hand, remained in the chaos he had created. He tried writing letters, Messages, rehearsed apologies. But nothing felt like enough. For the first time, he felt the weight of regret, not as guilt but as loss. And with that came silence. The press began to speculate. Rumors spread about the end of the project, internal conflicts, a failed romance. Olivia made no statements. She preferred to be judged in silence than to give voice to a lie. Ethan said nothing either. Out of respect or pain, no one knew. Months passed. The center remained on hold. But the walls had been raised, the rooms were painted, and in the heart of the foundation, one room remained empty, reserved for her. No one touched it. No one questioned it. It was like a symbol of something that almost was. One day, Olivia returned to the building. She didn't announce herself. She just walked in silently. The children recognized her and ran up to her. She smiled, her heart tight. There was love. There was truth. At the end of the hallway, Ethan appeared, thinner, quieter, and more human. They looked at each other for a long moment. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low. "Not yet," she replied. "But I'm finding my way back." Ethan took a deep breath, as if holding that question in for months. "I still hope you come back and for real, not just here." Olivia lowered her eyes, feeling the weight of his words. She didn't want promises. She wanted time. She wanted truth. And most of all, she needed to see actions before hearing declarations. "I don't know if I can trust again," she admitted, her voice steady but trembling. "You don't have to decide now," he replied. "Just don't give up on us completely." She studied him for a few seconds, searching for traces of the man she thought she knew. There was exhaustion, yes, but also change. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of a different kind of truth. Olivia walked to the empty room at the heart of the foundation. Inside, only a wooden table, stored paint, and an easel waiting. She ran her fingers over the surface like someone touching an old wound. Then she wrote in black pen a phrase on the wall: "Truth hurts, but it builds." When Ethan walked in and saw the phrase, he stood still. He didn't ask if it was a yes or a no. He didn't beg. He just smiled, with a relief that bordered on gratitude. She was still there, and that was more than he deserved. And that evening, under the heavy sky, they didn't embrace. They made no promises, but they shared the same space, the same pain, and the same silence, as if they both understood that love is also knowing how to wait, and that sometimes rebuilding begins like this, in silence. The room with Olivia's written phrase became a silent symbol at the foundation. Volunteers walked past it with reverence, as if something sacred lived there. Ethan never touched a thing. He left the paint, the notebooks, even the empty easel. It was her space, even in her absence. Olivia returned a few times but never announced it. She stayed only briefly, observed, organized papers, avoided interaction. Ethan respected every boundary, even with his restless heart. She was there, but distant, present, yet unreachable. The foundation kept growing. News outlets began publishing stories highlighting the project's social impact. Ethan declined interviews. He didn't want the spotlight. He wanted redemption. But eventually, the spotlight always finds its way back. On a rainy morning, Olivia received an unexpected call. A journalist from the Times asked for a statement. There were rumors the foundation was being used for image laundering, and Ethan's name was at the center. "Do you confirm the project was driven by personal guilt?" Olivia hung up without answering. But the question lingered. She herself was still searching for that answer. Had Ethan changed for her, or just to ease his own conscience? And deep down, did it even matter? That afternoon, Ethan knocked on the door of Olivia's old house. Her mother answered. She looked at him like someone who recognized the past but wasn't afraid of the present. "She's not here," she said bluntly, "but maybe that's for the best." Ethan handed over an envelope before leaving. It contained a complete dossier of the foundation, contracts, donations, audits, and a handwritten letter. Olivia read everything that night in silence. It was more than she expected. In the letter, Ethan didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked for accountability. He owned his mistakes with detail, without excuses, without escape. He said he loved her, but now understood love wasn't something you deserve, it's something you choose. And she was free. Olivia cried like she hadn't in months, not out of pain, but exhaustion. Because loving him was hurting her. But staying away hurt too. And perhaps the cruelest punishment of true love is having nowhere to run. She returned to the foundation the next day. Ethan was in the art room, cleaning paintbrushes alone. She walked in and closed the door. I read everything, the letter, the documents. He just nodded without looking up. You broke me on and helped me bloom, she said. But now, I need to bloom on my own. Ethan looked at her like the ground had just vanished beneath him. Are you saying goodbye? She took a deep breath. I'm saying I need to leave for now. He didn't try to stop her. He knew that insisting would be another form of control. And this time, he wanted to love her right. Even if it meant letting go. She turned and walked away, tears in her eyes, but her head held high. That same day, the foundation received a municipal award. Olivia was named as the visionary. But she didn't attend. She was on the road, alone. Headed to a small town in the countryside. She needed to find real silence. Weeks passed. Ethan kept working quietly, away from the media. The foundation kept growing, but her absence echoed through every room. Olivia, meanwhile, wrote essays, unsent letters, journal entries, anything to understand what she still felt. Until one day, she saw a story in the local newspaper. NY Social Center opens new wing named after woman who refused fame. It was her room. Olivia folded the paper carefully, like holding something fragile. It wasn't just her name on the wall. It was what he had finally understood. She didn't want tributes, Crumwin. She wanted respect. And Ethan, by staying away, by not claiming credit, was finally showing he was listening. It was the first time she felt light. That night, sitting on a simple porch overlooking the fields, she wrote. This time, it wasn't a cry for help. It was a letter. No expectations, no specific destination. Just honest words from a heart that was tired, but still alive. And somewhere between one line and the next, she realized she still loved him. But love wasn't enough. She needed trust. She needed to trust herself. And that would still take time. But now, there was a starting point. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid to begin again. At the foundation, Ethan looked at the plaque with her name every day, not as a tribute, but as a reminder of the man he needed to keep becoming. He still waited for her, but not like before. Now he waited with patience, with truth, knowing that the strongest kind of love is the one that never cages. And at that exact moment in different cities, they both closed their eyes at the same time, with the same longing in their chest and the same quiet certainty in their heart. It wasn't over yet. The room with Olivia's written phrase became a silent symbol at the foundation. Volunteers walked past it with reverence, as if something sacred lived there. Ethan never touched a thing. He left the paint, the notebooks, even the empty easel. It was her space, and even in her absence. Olivia returned a few times but never announced it. She stayed only briefly, observed, organized papers, avoided interaction. Ethan respected every boundary, even with his restless heart. She was there, but distant, present, yet unreachable. The foundation kept growing. News outlets began publishing stories highlighting the project's social impact. Ethan declined interviews. He didn't want the spotlight. He wanted redemption. But eventually, the spotlight always finds its way back. On a rainy morning, Olivia received an unexpected call. A journalist from the Times asked for a statement. There were rumors the foundation was being used for image laundering, and Ethan's name was at the center. Do you confirm the project was driven by personal guilt? Olivia hung up without answering. But the question lingered. She herself was still searching for that answer. Had Ethan changed for her? Or just to ease his own conscience? And deep down, did it even matter? That afternoon, Ethan knocked on the door of Olivia's old house. Her mother answered. She looked at him like someone who recognized the past but wasn't afraid of the present. "She's not here," she said bluntly, "but maybe that's for the best." Ethan handed over an envelope before leaving. It contained a complete dossier of the foundation, contracts, donations, audits, and a handwritten letter. Olivia read everything that night in silence. It was more than she expected. In the letter, Ethan didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked for accountability. He owned his mistakes with detail, without excuses, without escape. He said he loved her, but now understood love wasn't something you deserve. It's something you choose. And she was free. Olivia cried like she hadn't in months, not out of pain, but exhaustion. Because loving him was hurting her. But staying away hurt too. And perhaps the cruelest punishment of true love is having nowhere to run. She returned to the foundation the next day. Ethan was in the art room cleaning paintbrushes alone. She walked in and closed the door. I read everything. The letter, the documents. He just nodded without looking up. "You broke me and helped me bloom," she said. "But now, I need to bloom on my own." Ethan looked at her like the ground had just vanished beneath him. "Are you saying goodbye?" She took a deep breath. "I'm saying I need to leave for now." He didn't try to stop her. He knew that insisting would be another form of control, and this time, he wanted to love her right. Even if it meant letting go. She turned and walked away, tears in her eyes, but her head held high. That same day, the foundation received a municipal award. Olivia was named as the visionary, but she didn't attend. She was on the road, alone, headed to a small town in the countryside. She needed to find real silence. Weeks passed. Ethan kept working quietly, away from the media. The foundation kept growing, but her absence echoed through every room. Olivia, meanwhile, wrote essays, unsent letters, journal entries, anything to understand what she still felt. Until one day she saw a story in the local newspaper. NY Social Center opens new wing named after woman who refused fame. It was her room. Olivia folded the paper carefully, like holding something fragile. It wasn't just her name on the wall. It was what he had finally understood. She didn't want tributes. She wanted respect. And Ethan, by staying away, by not claiming credit, was finally showing he was listening. It was the first time she felt light. That night, sitting on a simple porch overlooking the fields, she wrote. This time it wasn't a cry for help. It was a letter. No expectations, no specific destination. Just honest words from a heart that was tired, but still alive. And somewhere between one line and the next, she realized she still loved him. But love wasn't enough. She needed trust. She needed to trust herself. And that one would still take time. But now, there was a starting point. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid to begin again. At the foundation, Ethan looked at the plaque with her name every day, not as a tribute, but as a reminder of the man he needed to keep becoming. He still waited for her, but not like before. Now he waited with patience, with truth, knowing that the strongest kind of love is the one that never cages. And at that exact moment in different cities, they both closed their eyes at the same time, with the same longing in their chest and the same quiet certainty in their heart. It wasn't over yet. Months passed since that quiet reunion at the cafe. The foundation became a symbol of transformation in a neighborhood the city had long forgotten. People came from everywhere, drawn by the hope the place radiated. And whenever someone asked, who had the idea, Ethan simply smiled and looked at Olivia, because he knew she was the heart of it all. Olivia returned to writing often. Her chronicles began appearing in independent newspapers, always focused on rebuilding. She wrote about pain turned into bridges, wounds that taught, and love that stayed. She never mentioned names, but those who knew the story knew, and those who didn't still felt it, because it was true. Ethan resumed his business life, but in a much lighter way. He delegated more, listened more, attended fewer galas and more real gatherings. He traded glass offices for afternoons in the foundation's courtyard, traded numbers for silence, and, most importantly, learned how to say sorry without expecting immediate forgiveness. One evening, while organizing foundation files, Olivia found Ethan's old notebook. She flipped through the handwritten pages with tenderness. There were drafts of the man he had once tried to hide and finally let exist. At the end, a loose sheet held a single sentence. "If I ever have to start over, I want it to be with you." She tucked the paper into her coat pocket without saying a word to anyone. Some things don't need replies. They need to be felt, carried close to the heart like anchors and wings. And that phrase was both. She was a home in the making. On the one-year anniversary of the social campaign, a new exhibition was held. This time, with photos of those impacted, stories written in their own handwriting. The final image was a painting by Olivia, colorful, intense, with imperfect strokes. It depicted a house with open windows and 2 pairs of shoes at the door. After the exhibition, there was a simple celebration. Children ran, adults laughed, life pulsed without ceremony. Ethan and Olivia were there, mingled among the others, without attention. But he watched her with that calm gaze of someone who had finally learned how to stay, and she, feeling his gaze, smiled, still shy, but whole. On the back porch, alone for a moment, he spoke. "I bought a piece of land in a small village." She looked at him surprised. Not to run away, to plant a small house, a garden, nothing grand. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" she asked, half laughing. "Not now, not yet. I just wanted you to know there's room." She stayed silent, processing, then replied softly, "Maybe I'll visit. Maybe I'll plant something there too." And both of them knew exactly what that meant. The following week, Olivia released her first book, a collection of short texts about love, loss, and rebuilding, a simple dedication to those who didn't stop feeling even when everything hurt. Ethan read the entire book in silence, eyes filled with tears. Between every line, their story was there. Years passed. The foundation expanded. The project spread to other regions. Olivia became a reference in social impact and emotional education. Ethan became the man Sophie had dreamed he could be. But above all, he became someone who knew how to love. They never had a big ceremony. They didn't need one. On a sunny morning, in the foundation's garden, they exchanged simple vows among friends. Olivia wore a light dress, barefoot with serene eyes. Ethan cried as he said, "I do," because he knew how much it had cost to get there. Their life together wasn't perfect. There were disagreements, hard days, old fears that resurfaced, but there was listening, there was presence, and that was enough. Because love didn't live in the easy days. It lived in the decision to stay. Sometimes they sat on the same porch where it all began. Silence between them, fingers intertwined, hearts at peace. They didn't say much, but sometimes Ethan would repeat the line from the old notebook, "If I ever have to start over, I want it to be with you." And Olivia, now with more wrinkles and fewer certainties, would smile. because she knew it wasn't a promise anymore. It was a life, fully lived, with falls, recoveries, and real love. And if there was one thing she had learned, it was this. True love isn't the one that arrives perfect. It's the one that chooses to stay. The house in the countryside was built slowly, like everything between them. It wasn't big or fancy, but it had a porch, garden flowers, and books in every corner. There, the sunsets were silent, scented, with coffee and rain-soaked earth. And when the world felt too loud, that's where they found each other. In the simplicity they had both learned to cherish. Olivia kept writing now in an even more mature tone. She no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Her words were for those who felt, not those who judged. Ethan, in turn, stepped away from the corporate spotlight. He became a mentor to young social entrepreneurs, teaching that success is when your heart finds purpose. Life wasn't a fairy tale, but it was beautiful in an honest way. They failed, they drifted, they started over, and kept choosing each other. Because love, they discovered, doesn't promise it won't hurt. It promises that, even when it does, you won't let go. And that was everything. One ordinary afternoon, sitting on the porch, Ethan held her time-marked hand. "You know," he said, gazing at the golden sky, "if I had to go back and do it all again." She looked at him with a soft smile. "I'd choose to get it all wrong with you, just so I could get it right with you in the end." And there, in silence, she squeezed his hand in return. And that's how their story went on. Not perfect, not easy, but deeply true. Because some scars never fade, but when well cared for, they bloom and tell forever the story of a love that chose to stay. And that's how two very different worlds learned to walk in step. Not because they forgot what hurt, but because they turned the wounds into bridges. Because they understood that true love doesn't need to be perfect, only real. And even after all the falls, it's still worth choosing to stay. If this story touched you, take a deep breath. Think of how many times love has asked you for courage. How many times life has forced you to begin again, with no guarantees. And remember, you too deserve a love that listens, that learns, that stays. If you believe in second chances and in love rebuilt with truth, like this video, comment on the moment that moved you the most, and share it with someone who needs this message today. If you've lived, or still hope to live, a love that transforms like Olivia and Ethan's, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Because here, stories are meant to touch the heart. Here, love isn't a fairy tale, it's a choice, it's presence, it's what stays, even when everything else falls apart.